and welcome back to Eurowatch, the number one podcast on the upcoming UEFA Euro tournament. Today, Alex and I are going to take just another left turn before we get back into the thick of it and talk a little bit about the tacticians and the chess masters who are making all these European teams tick. We're going to talk about a former legend striker of the game. We're going to talk about a man who has yet to win it all, and talking about a man who is the defending champion. We're going to be looking at the managers, if you hadn't guessed so far. So, Alex, how have you seen these managers? Are you impressed? Are you not? Give me your spiciest takes.
Well, I'm very excited. The managers we're going to talk about today are the Fernando Santos from Portugal, Andriy Shevchenko from Ukraine. Yes, he's managing Ukraine. And Didier Deschamps of France. I've got some very interesting takes, especially about Ukraine. But we're actually leaving Portugal to a special guest later on called Nathan Motz, a Portuguese football expert, long-term football expert, who's been studying the Seleção for over 15 years. He's even written a very successful book about them. So head over to the middle of the episode if you want to check that out. But it's a really interesting episode of Eurowatch we've got lined up today, isn't it, Ritwik?
Yeah, so Alex, I wanted to get sort of right into the thick of it with Deschamps, if you don't mind.
Sure, okay, go. Let's go Deschamps.
So, there is more to meets the eye when you think of Didier Deschamps. To a lot of people, he's the guy who lifted the World Cup as a manager of France, but he's also lifted it as the team captain in the 1998 World Cup, as well as being part of the backroom staff for the Euros of 2000, which they won as well. Now, he is a manager who has a very, very, very unique problem. I don't think any other manager in the current Euro crop has that. He has too many options. And it's come to a point where it's like, I'm calling it option paralysis. Everybody who has been following Deschamps' career over maybe the last 2 years has seen exactly how much France are stacked. They are so stacked, in fact, that Leicester City's best defender, Wesley Fofana, can't even make it to the squad of the under-21 French side, let alone the senior team. Now, can you believe that, Alex? Wesley Fofana.
It is pretty crazy. I mean, it's often a topic to poke fun at, but the France national team is probably the most stacked thing in the world. I mean, it's not something to go into too much, but it's like to demonstrate the level of talent. There's teams like Senegal now that are getting a genuinely really strong national team purely based off players with Senegalese heritage growing up in France who have no hope of getting into the French national team, opting to play for their parents' or their grandparents' country. I think Koulibaly, Ismaila Sarr, Papa Sarr of Metz as well. Lots of players
and some established stars as well. I mean, you have Riyad Mahrez, as well as Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who are playing for Algeria and Gabon respectively. So it's that much. It's that sheer embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, it's crazy how many players. Like if it was as simple as if it was as simple as all these players were playing for France, then France would have like a C team that could win this Euro. So Deschamps has definitely got a headache picking the best side.
Now we'll talk a little bit about Deschamps' record's been good. In 2020, I believe, he had 5 wins out of 6 games in the UEFA Nations League, just drawing to holders Portugal. 2-0 loss to Finland in November, bit of an outlier of a result, with the pandemic and isolating. It's a miracle that these games are even happening, but you can shirk off one loss if you're the French national side. But the biggest problem now comes with Deschamps having to give everyone an opportunity. It seems like it's crystallized. It seems like his squad is pretty set. He knows who he wants to play. Deschamps is also known for having favorites who pretty much always make the side, even if they're not playing for their clubs. Olivier Giroud, Moussa Sissoko, Steven Nzonzi, being the shining examples of that. But they're the kind of grit players that Deschamps always needs. Like, if you want to win a tournament, you need to have 11 people giving their heart and soul for for the cause, and you need certain unspectacular but brutish presence in the team, and that's what he has. But even beyond that, it's one of the main challenges which I thought was the centre back pairing, Alex. Umtiti probably sold his soul to the devil for being part of France's World Cup winning side, because he's fallen off an absolute cliff.
Yeah.
Form and fitness is gone. I'm amazed that he's still at Barcelona, but his teammate at Barcelona isn't doing that well either. Clement Lenglet, a bit of a resurgence now, but his position's under threat from Araujo. Piqué still putting in decent performances out of everyone's expectation, and Lenglet, who used to be the first choice sub that came in, maybe no longer there. But you have two sort of younger players in Presnel Kimpembe and Kurt Zouma, who have really impressed even with their time in the national team. But, as far as defenses go, Alex, do you think Deschamps will have, a crystallized centre-back pairing? Who would you like to see partnering Rafael Varane, who I think is a pretty much sure shot to start?
It's difficult. Because, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anyone, really, looking at our pod notes and I see in the list of centre-backs, but Rafael Varane will definitely be in there. Now, Kimpembe's had great moments for PSG this season, but he's also committed 6 errors, and Deschamps is the perfect example of how being boring can get you to win things. Like, Deschamps is one of the most boring men alive, and that's why he's great. Like, he could pick like a 4-2-2-2 of like Ousmane Dembele, Griezmann. He rope back in Benzema, play Ndombele and players like this, but he won't. What he'll do is, I forgot about Mbappe there as well. He'll put the boring team in there. But what was going with that, I guess, is that I think Kimpembe's eccentricness might not get him in. Now, Lenglet, I sort of disagree, because I've done a bit of some statistical work recently on best European centre-backs, and Lenglet's up there. Like, in terms of his passes forward, the tackles he wins, the aerials he wins. I wasn't sure if he was suspended for El Clasico at the weekend. I did watch that, and I do think Barcelona were pretty at the back. Like, player A and player B is what I called them.
They've been that way for a while.
Player A and player B, i.e. Mengiza and Araujo, like, I've never heard of them, and they barely filled me with confidence. I know I'm Euro expert and I meant to hear these players, but I just they felt like they came off a Spanish factory line. So I guess exactly. And Kurt Zouma as well has not been. There's a good video going around actually of how positionally unaware he likes to be. So I guess there's a.
But Alex, he has as many Premier League goals as Timo Werner, so he can't.
Yeah, but he's probably conceded as many as Timo Werner has scored. Like, he's always out of position, and if you're looking for heart and commitment, I don't think Zuma's going to give that. He turns off during games. So,
which makes it even harder, because my other options were Dayo Upamecano of RB Leipzig. He's definitely wilting his errors away. He has a good partner, but an injured partner in Ibrahim Konate. But if you want dynamic, that's Dayo Upamecano. He is that kind of presence at the back. But there's also Benjamin Pavard, who can also play centre back. And Alex, we're missing out one of the players you always like to mention, who probably won't even make the squad, is Aymeric Laporte.
Yeah, it looks like he missed his boat. He was going to be called up, and then he got injured about a season and a half ago. So Laporte out, and Pavard I think will play it right back. So I don't think Pavard's getting anywhere near the centre back slot.
Yeah, but sort of moving back to other problems Deschamps has had is he is now starting to experiment with this formation. It's largely been a 4-2-3-1, but now he's switching to a hybrid of a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2. And that's largely to make use of players like Kylian Mbappe, Antoine Griezmann, and also fit in Olivier Giroud. Now, Olivier Giroud usually comes in a 4-2-3-1 as the apex of the attack, with Griezmann coming in from the left, Mbappe coming in from the right. But that puts a lot of pressure on the fullbacks, especially if Griezmann's spending a lot of time in the center, where he's the most effective, I believe. But Griezmann, much like Cristiano Ronaldo, doesn't like being the apex of the attack. So having a foil like Mbappe or Giroud does really well for that. But that has a domino effect from everything going back, because he does have a lot of talented midfielders. N'Golo Kante at the base, players like Adrien Rabiot, players like Tanguy Ndombele, Moussa Sissoko, Paul Pogba. Obviously, Corentin Tolisso missing in action because he's been missing in action since probably the last World Cup. So it's this hybrid 4-2-2-2 to try and accommodate for those, because France, to their benefit, don't have to rely on a creative number 10 type of player. Maybe even a waxy passer like a Cruz, or Portugal have in Bruno Fernandes. England probably have in Grealish, Madison, or Foden. France don't need that kind of player, and it's a testament to Deschamps that he's finally experimenting with that. Bringing it a little wider, bring a bit more directness, and that's going to be very difficult to play against.
So that being said, obviously it looks like he's trying to expect a little bit more, and I think that is probably a bit of a reaction to some fans saying that some French football fans have still said they don't want Deschamps in because they feel like he's wasting it. You've written in our notes that if Deschamps doesn't win this, especially if he makes it out of the group, it's going to be an embarrassment. Because France have already done a domestic, a consecutive double before, when they, like you mentioned before, they won the 1988 World Cup and then the 2000s Euros. Do you think he's got what it takes to repeat that? Because he was a part of that double, like you said. Do you think he's got what it takes to do that?
I think he does. And people also need to remember that Didier Deschamps also had skin in the game with Monaco. He took them to a Champions League final. He's been a finalist at a Euro before. I think this tournament will carry extra weight because it has to exercise the demons of losing to Portugal at home in the last Euros. It's been 5 years since then. France have become world champions. They've come in leaps and bounds. They don't have to rely on Moussa Sissoko to start all the attacks from midfield. They don't have to rely on Bakary Sagna. He's got a much better team than he had then. And it's if they make it past the group and don't win, that's gonna be a problem. Whether or not it means Deschamps is out, I can't say for certain. But if Deschamps wins the Euros, I don't see him. What does he have left to win? All he has left to defend is his legacy. And you saw what happened with Del Bosque. Won 3 back-to-back tournaments and then got thoroughly spanked in the World Cup because of his own hubris. Because he thought older players could manage.
I think Deschamps strikes me as a boring character like Joachim Low, who will just stay in the job until he's kicked out. But no, that was an interesting look into Deschamps, because we always just write France off as favourites. Like we write him off in the way that they're gonna win everything. But it's interesting to have a look into some of the problems he is having to look at in defence. It's not all rosy, and it is that pressure right now must be incredible. Now, I'm going to introduce myself and say we're heading over to Alex, who's interviewing a very special guest he's about to introduce. I am now here, as I introduced myself just before. I am with Nathan Motz. He has managed to come on. We've been lucky enough to be joined. Now, Nathan is, I was just telling him beforehand, he's probably the biggest expert we've had on the podcast so far, on Eurowatch. Nathan's an expert on Portuguese football. He's appeared on the Seleção podcast, writes for Portugal.net, and you've written a book as well, Nathan, haven't you? The 13th chapter. I think I've covered quite a bit of you there, but if you had to introduce yourself, how would you introduce yourself, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm one of I would say the growing legion of non-Portuguese background enthusiasts in Portuguese football, and that started basically after the conclusion of the 2006 World Cup, and just kind of built from there, with my obsession with both football in general and Portuguese football specifically growing, culminating with the opportunity at Euro 2012 to cover the Portuguese national team and their group stage adventures in Ukraine. And then from that point on, me and some of the other contributors to the website Portugal.net decided that it was about time for Portuguese football to earn the respect that it was deserving in our attempt to chronicle the history of the Portuguese national team's participation at major tournaments. And that's what we did in the book that you just referenced, the 13th chapter, which culminated obviously in the Euro 2016 victory in France. And so since that time, I've specialized almost exclusively with the Portuguese national team players, tactics, and just their endeavors as they continue to rise from the status of a minnow, somewhat of an outsider, to something looking like a world power as we move further into the 21st century. So that's a little bit about my background. Hopefully that'll do for now.
Oh, that'll more than do. That's a far more weighty credentials list than myself. So I think our listeners are going to be already amped up for it. And I'm glad you've got this background, because I want to kickstart where I think most people would have really heard of Portugal. Like, obviously, we've heard of the Mourinho's or Ronaldo's, but the Portuguese national team definitely rose to prominence in 2016 after they won the Euros in somewhat of not a very goal-scoring manner, I think is fair to say. There was lots of draws in that in that tournament win. Firstly, have Portugal changed in their approach or in their games since that tournament?
I guess in a word, not as much as some people would like. I do think there is beginning to be some discontent about the way Portugal have played. So defensively, pragmatically, whichever word you want to use to describe their play. Mm-hmm. There's no secret that Fernando Santos, the Portuguese national team manager, prioritizes a strong defense. And that's not necessarily a foul. There's good statistical, analytical reasons to make that choice when assessing and choosing tactics. But the problem is that the players at his disposal are not the same as they were in 2016. There's a lot more creativity and a lot more attacking force in this side. And so Santos's decisions to prioritize kind of a more structured, more hesitant or ponderous approach offensively is beginning to cause some discontent in Portuguese supporter circles. So I would say that there are attempts being made to find the ideal formation to bring out the best in Portugal's attacking play. And in my opinion, that has not been discovered yet. So it's a work in progress, even as we're looking at the Euros starting in just a couple months.
So that's really interesting. Can you tell us a bit about the system then at the moment? So you said it's a work in progress. What's the current state? They're still playing like a 4 at the back, right? But I've seen 4-2-3-1s, 4-3-3s played. What's Fernando Santos looking like at the moment with his system? What are Portugal looking like at the moment?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's in flux at the moment. In the most recent round of World Cup qualifying matches, we mostly saw a 4-3-3 look with one holding midfielder and basically two attack, our workhorse midfielders in central midfield with Ronaldo and either Diogo Jota or André Silva or João Felix accompanying him in a trident. Those formations did yield a great deal of shots on target. And they did create chances, but the finishing was lacking. And it still is debatable as to whether or not Portugal's creative midfielders in particular are being used properly. Players like Bernardo Silva, for example, Bruno Fernandes, who's having a great season at Manchester United, and other players. Some of the reason for the difficulty in choosing styles was, if you go back to 2019 to the Nations League final, Santos was playing something of a 4-4-2 double pivot. And the double pivot means that you use two defensive midfielders instead of one. And that was certainly something you can deduce from Santos's defensive style. It made a lot of sense, but it actually really worked well, better than I even thought. And I criticized that system at the time. But we had a player named William who plays for Real Betis, and he was able to shuttle back and forth from his defensive midfield role into attack a lot better than most defensive midfielders can. And so it actually worked. And Portugal was able to win the inaugural Nations League final against the Netherlands fairly handily, in my opinion. Since that time, Williams fallen out of form, and we haven't been able to put together any version of a 4-4-2 or 4-3-3 that's been able to replicate the success that we saw in the Nations League final against the Netherlands. So a lot of things are happening. There's a lot of new players coming into the squad. Pedro Neto, for example, was involved most recently, the Wolverhampton winger. There's a lot of young players who a lot of whom are playing for the under-21s right now in the Euros. Trincao, for example, from Barcelona. that may factor in to the final discussion whenever it comes to settling on a formation for the Euros.
That's really interesting. And before we touch on some of the big players, I do think, like Portugal's squad, like you touched on there, attacking wise, it's been chock filled with superstars down the last couple of years. Me and Ritwik, mainly me, I'm quite a Lille fan. I like to bang the drum to a few of their players. So I'm wondering, are any of the sort of lower players, I guess, the less well-known players, likely to make it to the Euro? So I'm talking Renato Sanchez, Jose Font as well. I think he was involved recently.
Yes.
Sergio Oliveira as well. And then you touched Pedro Neto, Daniel Podence. Are any of those players likely to make Fernando Santos' final squad?
Yeah, Jose Font, I think definitely. Renato Sanchez, based on the way he played against Luxembourg in the most recent match, I would say definitely. His form has been really inconsistent for Lille, but I think if you watch him throughout the season, when he's on his game, it's impossible to think about excluding him from the squad. You know, he's just such a vigorous player. He's got so much energy. He's so strong on the ball, and he's really what Portugal need in central midfield right now. So, but like I said, being inconsistent, we definitely have to have we need to see a little bit better from him on a routine basis. That's what Santos is going to look for. I think he'll make the squad. As far as some of those other players, Sergio Oliveira, again, another midfield talent, a late bloomer. He's in his late 20s and really hasn't featured much for Portugal until just the last couple of years. I think it's going to be very close between him and stalwarts like João Moutinho for like maybe the final spot in Portugal's midfield. So a lot of fringe players. This version of the Seleção, the Portuguese national team, is probably one of the most competitive that we've seen in probably about the last 2 decades. So it's going to be very difficult for fringe players to stake their claim.
That's really interesting. I guess just one final one quickly. Do you reckon Nuno Mendes as well? Would he? Because I know he's having a great season at Sporting. He's been linked to big clubs. I assume Rafael Guerrero's nailed on at left back, but is Mendes likely to make the backup slot?
Yeah, I think he's the backup for now. And, you know, it's interesting that Guerrero can be used as a midfielder as well. So I'm almost wondering if there's going to be more changes to the side in which we see Mendes become the starting left back and Guerrero actually pushed into midfield, similar to how he plays for Dortmund sometimes. That's something that Santos has never done before. But I think with Mendes' emergence as a force on the wing, as a fullback, it gives Santos some more options there. So I'm interested to see how that'll play out. Nice.
So we've touched on some of the fringe players. Now let's move on to the bigger players. And from a Santos perspective, are there any of the big players like Fernandes, Felix, Ronaldo that will be starting no matter what? And I know that might sound like a weird question, especially to the audience. You know, these great players, why wouldn't you start them? But you think with France, they tend to start Giroud every match. Didier Deschamps starts Giroud every match. You'll definitely start Conte. The same with England. They'll definitely be starting Harry Maguire and Harry Kane. What players does Santos turn to that are absolute shoo-ins, the first names on the team sheet? Which players are these?
You know, I think Portugal's goalkeeper, if he's fit, Rui Patricio, is one of the lesser celebrated keepers in Europe, but he's a stalwart. His name is going to be the first on the list if he's fit. Ronaldo, of course. There's growing discontent about Ronaldo too, but I'll set that aside for later. I don't think Santos is going to make a decision to go another way. Ronaldo will be in the starting 11. Diogo Jota, also for Liverpool, his status has just continued to rise throughout the season. And again, barring injury, I would expect to see him in the lineup. Bernardo Silva, I would expect to see him in the lineup. And then as far as Bruno, this might be a player who we might not see enter the starting 11, which is an incredible statement given the form for Manchester United. But it's the tactical utility. How are we going to employ a midfielder with his skill set amongst all of the other talents that we have on the side? And one of the enduring questions with him is his risk taking. Santos does value his goal scoring threat. That's clear, but the risk taking is a bit anomalous when you look at the skill sets of the other midfielders around him, like Bernardo, who plays at City, where he takes good care of the ball and makes the tidy, safe choices, prioritizes possession. But then, in Fernandes, you have the hard running, hard pressing type that Santos likes as well. So it's really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see exactly where he ends up deciding about that. And then you have players like João Moutinho, who are probably not going to be in the starting 11 anymore, but will provide impetus off the bench. And then really for me, there's going to be big decisions made about defensive midfield as well. Is it going to be PSG's Danilo? Is it going to be Wolverhampton's Ruben Neves? Or possibly João Palhinha from Sporting, who's had a great season? So still a lot to sort out in the starting 11.
Yeah, and I really feel you about Bruno. I mean, Ritwik isn't here at the moment. He's also from the States, but he's in California. So it's currently just gone past 7 a.m. for him. But he'd be shouting in agreement about Bruno. He's the most, he continually tells me, he's a Man United fan, says he's amazing, but the most frustrating player in the world to watch when you're losing, because he can give the ball away when you don't want to give it away.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah. Just because I'm enjoying picking your brain on this. Just one more thing about the players, because it just came to my mind. For the 2014 World Cup, you probably know this, but if not, I remember Joachim Low, he was told not to take Sami Khedira because there was far better midfielders in the Germany squad, and Khedira is injured. But he took Khedira purely because behind the scenes in the dressing room, he was a major influence. Is there any players like that for Portugal who... They might not be the best on the pitch, but as a member of the side, they're so influential that Santos will try his hardest to get them in despite their playing form?
Yeah, I mean, the aforementioned Moutinho, I think, is that player in particular because Portugal's midfield is in a state of flux with a lot of players coming in that were not a part of the Euro 2016 victory. For example, Bernardo Silva was injured for that tournament, and Bruno Fernandes wasn't in the picture at all. And so when you have João Moutinho on the side, and he's in something like the top 5 caps of all time for Portugal, you have that experience, you have that seniority. He's the type of player that's going to be a huge influence in bringing the various elements of this side together into a coherent force. And so I definitely think that type of player we have in him. Pepe also, the rugged central defender who has made himself famous once again recently for his performance against Juventus in the Champions League. But he's also that type of kind of influence on some of the younger players like Ruben Dias, who is the center back of the future for Portugal. And so we do have some of the, and of course, Cristiano himself, just a leader by example, and definitely is in the vein of a player who, aside from his contribution on the pitch, is hugely influential in molding the next generation.
Nice. That Pepe performance against Juventus was the most favourite I've ever seen. I was watching it, and I was looking at the stats the whole way through. And by the 60th minute, he'd made 11 clearances, when the average is about 4 per game.
Yeah.
Absolute monster. But okay, so we've touched on so many big players for Portugal, and it's clear the hopes are high. In fact, when me and Ritwik did our predictions of the Euros, we put France as the winners, but Portugal definitely in the final. So almost a repeat of 2016 there, I guess. What is the pressure like on Fernando Santos right now? Because is there a huge expectation on him to deliver on this current squad? What's the perception like of it? What's it like in Portugal?
Yeah, there is huge expectation. So I would say, unlike the World Cup in 2018, when we felt that we had earned the Euro 2016 win, but we were still a bit uncertain about how we were going to actually put together a better football playing side. 2018 was kind of forgiven for Santos. We made that early, it was a round of 16 exit versus Uruguay, and didn't play particularly well even in the group stage, and he was forgiven for that. But in the ensuing years, with all the talent that Portugal has at its disposal, some people even saying that the version of the Seleção which we see today is possibly its most talented ever in its history. The pressure is enormous, and I absolutely 100%, this is a guarantee. If Portugal do not do something significant at this Euros, that's it for Fernando Santos. Though he'll be fired as soon as they come home. So it's that kind of pressure. There's no doubt. There's already Portugal supporters clamoring for a new manager to do a little bit of a better job assembling a more attacking and creative side. I'm not in that contingent, but I do understand people are growing a little bit more concerned about the way Portugal are playing, and so there's already enormous pressure, and that's only going to continue right up through the Euros.
Wow, that was very insightful. Very, very powerful as well to say the fact that if he doesn't deliver in some capacity, that this could be it for him. Where you might think with a manager who's delivered this much, you like some nations, I guess, like with Germany, they stick behind. But that's pretty interesting. And with this being said, then Nathan, where do you think Portugal will finish? Obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, you should know by now. Portugal are in the group of death with Germany, France, and Hungary. I assume, as a Portuguese fan, I assume you're not going to say they're going straight out there. But how far do you think Portugal can go this summer?
Yeah, it really is down to the it's difficult. I want to be rational and just say that looking at the group that we're in, it's always down to a question of if we get out of this group, you really like our chances to go pretty far in this tournament. That said, some are saying this group is the most difficult European Championship group ever selected, ever drawn. And I would tend to maybe agree with that statement. You have the world champions, France, you have the European champions, and then you have Germany, who, while a young squad, are beginning to find their feet. There's the feeling that Germany are beginning to find their form again. They struggled a little bit in the last World Cup qualifying matches at points. I can hear that, but they're looking at the talent in that side. This is going to be an extraordinarily difficult group for any of these teams. And then you have Hungary, who are at home, playing in Budapest for 2 of their matches, and so it's not necessarily a gimme with them either. I think Portugal will survive the group, and the reason I say that is because they've survived every group of death they've ever been put in. Going back to Euro 2012, for example, they were paired alongside Germany and the Netherlands, which at the time had only been beaten once in qualifying, had some of the finest wingers, Ian Robben, Rafael van der Vaart, in the world, playing for them. And Portugal still managed to get out of that group, even though Portugal at the time were not as lethal a force, at least on paper, as they are today. And so I think Portugal make it out of the group. And from there, I want to say this is a team that isn't, in spite of its talent, I don't know. I don't have the confidence yet in its tactical assembly and in the way the players are participating together on the pitch to say that we can win. But I do think we're looking at a deep run, possibly a semifinal or maybe even a final appearance if we can get out of the group.
Brilliant. Wow, that was very comprehensive. That's something we'll probably replay all the way through our podcast, all the way to the Euros. Well, we're going to head back to the podcast now. But if you, like me, felt like you've just been through an education from Nathan, we'll link the Sell Us Out podcast and his book on Amazon in the description below. Back to Alex and the actual podcast. We hope you enjoyed that. Nathan Motz is a great guy. I am certain he was. What a wonderful person. Insight. Ritwik, you loved it,
right?
What
a wonderful person. I loved it. I loved hearing all about how Ruben Neves is a trequartista.
Yes, that was a key topic, which I will now put into the questions. No, anyway, that was nice to get an insight into Portugal and France. But now we're going to touch on a manager now. For full clarity, Ritwik didn't know was a manager. And in fairness to myself, I didn't know.
I had no idea.
I didn't know was a manager.
But we want you to know now.
Yes.
Because we know now.
I think he's the most interesting one. It is Andriy Shevchenko, the former Milan and Chelsea striker. He is now the manager of Ukraine. It's his first job in football management. Ritwik, what would you like to know? Because I've got my notes in front of me. I've watched a bit of Ukraine. What's the sort of thing you want to know?
I want to know exactly how many positions Alexander Zinchenko has played. I want to know this. He's a Swiss Army knife he's a Swiss Army Slav.
I think he's played pretty much everywhere apart from left back. He's played deep against France recently, where Ukraine drew. I believe 1-1 in the end, right? Zinchenko played as like a defensive midfielder in a 3-4-2-1.
I mean, fullbacks can often do
that.
Yeah,
it's weird to think, because you think of him as an attacking player who's been shifted in defence, but he's been shifted in defence for like 3 years now, so he's actually quite a good defender. So he's so weirdly all-rounded. He's the type of player that's was being fast-tracked into this Ukraine side. And when Shevchenko came into the job, he came into it in 2016, he was tasked with bringing together a generation of young Ukraine talent and making the national team young and exciting and cohesive. And for a bit of background on him, because I feel like that would have been the next question anyway. Shevchenko's Ukraine, and they didn't qualify for the 2018 World Cup. However, it wasn't necessarily seen as a loss, actually. It was, even after the qualification, the reports generally were that the team felt a lot of harmony and spirit together, and that they were generally moving together as a project. So there wasn't any alarm bells, there wasn't any calls for Shevchenko to go, necessarily, in the research I can find. It was actually more the opposite. It was, we're building to something here. And it's that patience appears to have paid off, because Ukraine have qualified for the Euros this summer unbeaten, and in their performances, they actually beat Portugal. They drew 0-0 with Portugal and beat them as well 2-1. They obviously recently drew with France in 2021. They've beaten Spain last year.
Those are some scalps.
Yeah, the only real bad one was I think it was last year as well. It was international friendly. They lost 7-1 to France. That's genuinely the only terrible result I've seen here, and especially in the Spanish game where they won 1-0. I think it was a Nations League match. They're really impressive, and there's a lot to look at here. Would you like me to list a few of the players, because it might surprise you, a couple of the players, I guess, that you don't realise are in this team that are actually, like, they're names you've heard of, but they're not ones that are shafted in our face every day. Would you like to hear a few?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah, give it to me.
So there's a couple of players I'm just going to first of all say that have been left out recently. That includes Real Madrid's young goalkeeper, Andriy Lunin, who you might remember, Football Manager hero. He's not really playing Real Madrid. I don't know if he's got a minute, so he's been left out, as well as Yarmolenko for West Ham. Yarmolenko, he hasn't played as much, but also I think getting him out is a part of Shevchenko's effort to keep the squad age down. It's currently 26.3.
Andriy Yarmolenko just actually like the Chernobyl surviving elder statesman who just has one foot.
I don't know if that's offensive or hilarious or both. I'm gonna go with both. Chernobyl.
We like our hot takes here at Eurowatch.
Wait, is he actually? This might be a dumb question. Is he actually a Chernobyl survivor? He's old enough.
What? No.
Oh no.
No.
His parents might be. You never know. No. It's Ukraine, big country. Anyway, the players back on track now. They have Malinovsky and Kovalenko of Atalanta. Those are the big European ones, as well as Zinchenko. But there's a few players in here that you'll definitely see the names of. For example, the pronunciation.
Andrei Pyatov is the captain.
Tisyangov, yeah, the right winger playing for Kiev. And here's an interesting fact, Ritwik. There's only like I had it written down, but there's only about 6 players in the entire recent squad that do not play for Shakhtar Donetsk or Dynamo Kiev. Every other player is it's genuinely about like 16 players plays for those two teams, which is so you might can go one or two ways. I can go, wow, okay, Ukraine's talent is all in one place, but also There is no other nation in the Euros who has the type of squad harmony like that. They're all playing in the same league. The players will know each other extremely well. And Tsangov is definitely the highlight. He's the one who scored the winner against Spain. And he's been a player long tip to go to England. I think he's like 22 now, or possibly 21.
Interesting.
And he's got, I think, 16 goal contributions in the Ukraine Premier League in about 20 appearances. And his goal scoring is really a key part of this team, because under Shevchenko's time, just so some broader statistics as well before you fire away, Shevchenko's win rate is 47.7%, which is okay.
That's high.
Yeah, it's decent.
That's high for a manager managing
Ukraine. For like a middling nation,
Definitely.
It's pretty decent. And Ukraine, in defence, they've been a little more suspect, but they've averaged a goal every 66 minutes across Shevchenko's tenure, which is really good.
Wow, I'll take that. I'll take that.
So what's your thoughts on Ukraine? They're just their group as well going into the Euros will be Austria, the Netherlands, and North Macedonia. What are you?
Definitely doable.
Yeah.
Definitely doable. But I wanted to ask, because I'm looking at the squad that's played in 2021. There's one major player I'm seeing missing, but I don't know whether he's just gone off the radar. He's injured. Where on earth is Yevhen Konoplyanka?
Oh, I think he's just really, really old. I know he's playing at Shakhtar, but I think he's just really
30. He's
yeah,
30.
But yeah.
No, Shakhtar. He signed in 2019. He was on loan at Schalke and then he came back. Is he just really gone that bad?
Yeah, actually, funnily enough, I could provide some insights. I've been recently doing some work on Shakhtar. He hasn't really played at all. Shakhtar have got a really exciting generation going through at the moment, including players like I think Konoplyanka's position's on left wing, and at left wing they've got a guy called Solomon, an Israeli who's really good actually, both-footed. So Konoplyanka, I think he's only got 300 minutes in the Champions League and Europa League, if that.
Wow.
So yeah, he's not. If he was playing good, he probably would be in this team. But I think one, he's just not been performing, and two, Shevchenko has really proven that he's kind of the opposite of Deschamps. He's not relying on players he trusts. He's been very open. But I want to say
that's really refreshing to see, actually, or to hear about.
Yeah, it's nice to see that, because it might not get them very far, because there's always an element of risk to that, because generally experience is relied on well in tournaments, but it's fun to see this sort of project going on. And I will say as well, if nothing else, Ukraine have got a brilliant goalkeeper in Bushan. I'm watching a couple of highlights. I'll go back to the Spain game a bit, because that's like one of their best performances. Spain could have won that game had it not been for Bushan. He carried on closing down Ferran Torres and players like that as they're getting one-on-one. So I think, if nothing else, even though Ukraine's defence is probably their weakest bit, they have the ability to score against anyone, and in goal they've got a really strong keeper going into the Euros. So I'm kind of bullish about them, I think they, especially in that group, Netherlands, Austria, North Macedonia, I think they're favourites to go second at least. And if Netherlands fuck up, it could easily go top. So it's refreshing, right? Like you said, really fun to see.
Yeah, and you made a good point about a lot of them playing together in the same leagues, and I struggle with this sometimes, because I look at teams like Italy, I look at teams like England, pretty much 99% all from the same league. Doesn't really foster too much belief. But I think with the East European nations, there is something different about them when they get going. It's almost it's almost metronomic, because I remember when can't really put my head to it. I think Ukraine were playing England in the last Euros, and I think it was a 3-2 win for England. But Ukraine played with a remarkable amount of fluidity. There was no one was bigger than the team. If one player was being stretched out, another player would just like telepathically come in and fill up for them. There was no sense of, well, I'm doing this on my own. It was really, there is no I in team. And that was really refreshing to see, because when you're at these international tournaments, you need people constantly covering for you, because it's a tournament. It's a cup tournament. You have to play for the win every single time. Draw is not going to be good enough. So when you're doing that, you leave yourself open to a lot of counterattacks, leave yourself open to some defensive liabilities. And that's where, if you have the good communication with your teammates, if you have that kind of understanding that goes beyond, the spoken word, it really helps.
Exactly.
And that could be Ukraine's ace up their sleeve.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting.
And they're tough as nails.
It's going
so that's also going to be a problem.
It's going to be really interesting to see. And it's nice that... It's nice the teams we've covered in this, because I think Portugal are a bit more middling. They're coming into a bit of a golden generation, I think, or at least some of their players are on the upper end of it. France are very much leaning on their older players and rather than blooding the youth per se. Whereas the last team we've covered today, Ukraine, like the last thing I hit off, because I've just got their lineup actually from defense, right? It is in 2020. And the defence, at left back, they had Eduard Sobol of Club Brugge, 25 years old. Centre back, Vitaly Mykolenko, 21-year-old for Dynamo Kiev. Next to him, they had Ilya Zabrany, 18-year-old. And then a right back, they had Alexander Karavev, and he was 28 years old. And then Bushan in goal, 26. Such a young team, and it's nice to see. We're going to get a bit of a mix-up, I think, Ukraine and Shevchenko. It's really interesting to see the project he's cultivated there. So, as well, if you guys want to let us know, what sort of... If you're a manager of the Euros, would you be blooding the youth, or would you be... Like Shevchenko, would you be leaning on the experience, or going through with the youngsters? I think it does depend on your position, but it's just something to think about.
I think...
Anyway, I was...
Yeah,
go on.
You do raise an interesting point about the kind of approaches people take. The way I see it is, if you want to get out of the group, you trust the youth. If you want to win the knockout stages and get to the final and win that, you trust your experience. I think it's blood and thunder. Whether the thunder will make the noise and scare opposition, the blood flowing through your veins, the one that's been in your body the entire time, that's going to be what's going to see you through. And you see these problems with a lot of teams. You see the problems with Germany. They have such a promising blend of players. They have people like Kai Havertz, Thijs Ginter, Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry, but they're missing those leaders. They're missing those... Thomas Muller. I mentioned this in the last time, the players who've been outcast, plus people like Podolski, Lahm and Schweinsteiger. You need that experience, because when the young players lose their heads, they're usually the attackers you rely on to, build all of your goals. But the moment they lose their heads, where is the experience that's going to come in and calm them down and say, it's okay, you made a mistake, we'll cover for you, just be at the right place at the right time next time. So it's a little bit of both.
Well put, Mr. Metaphorical. We're loving some of the analogies and things you put in there. But that'll be it from me and Ritwik, at least. I mean, we have to thank Nathan here, because he saved us our recording. Usually we're going for 40 minutes to an hour. We're only half an hour in for us two, and it's been a lot longer for you guys. But thank you very much, Nathan, for coming on. We're sure your analysis was great, and thank you, Ritwik. I've got it written here, Ritwik. It is your turn to do the outro. Hit us with it. Go for it.
So we're closing in. It's less than 80 days to go. All these leagues are warming up. The players are getting ready. The stage is probably not set, but fans are coming back. Football is coming back, and we're going to have a tournament this summer, and we cannot wait to bring you every dirty detail from it, because that's what we do it here at Eurowatch. Keep you informed, and we love to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much.